Let's bring in Federal Prosecutor Joe Moreno, who's with us. So, Joe, this has opened a Pandora's box. It is a roadmap. How do you think this referral will be received within the DOJ?
Christian, I was reflecting after watching the final committee hearing today, and the first thought that I kind of had was the committee has done a brilliant job in the last year and a half showing that President Trump, or former President Trump, was responsible for what happened on January 6th. But the question now is he criminally liable, right? Was his behavior as egregious as it was? Are the laws that the Congress has referred today, or that the Department of Justice might come up with on its own independently, are they customized in a way to address his behavior? That's going to be a not easy road, and I on the point about the context of the committee itself, I happen to think that while the committee was flawlessly executed in terms of its presentation, I actually think that findings can be more strong, more powerful when you have a defense, someone at least trying to punch back on the other side. So while it was a really nice layout of evidence, there has not been a vigorous defense to actually push back against that evidence. And so that's what we might see, depending on what the Department of Justice now does with these referrals.
Just to be clear, Joe, we've seen the outtakes, the videos that they've given us. There may be evidence that those around Donald Trump gave, which could be exculpatory, which might put it in different context to the benefit of the former president.
I think the factual evidence is what it is, and it's very powerful against Donald Trump. I do think there are legal theories, though, that can be challenged here, and I actually think that a good defense lawyer will be able to kind of make some progress in attacking some of these theories. Remember, the insurrection charge goes back to the Civil War. There's a reason it's not used, and it's because it's sort of antiquated, right? And it's going to be difficult to prove that Donald Trump intended his words to imminently incite violence. Each of these charges, while they sound very powerful, have to be now proven element by element. And that's where a good defense will really be able to kind of push back on some of these. So it's definitely not a foregone conclusion here.
Let's quickly look at those charges, because they're urging the Department of Justice to charge the president on 4 serious counts. The report, which will be released on Wednesday, that is essentially the roadmap, the evidence to bring those charges. So they are, as Joe's just said, the charge of assisting or aiding an insurrection, the obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to make false statements, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Just before we move on, Joe, just come back to that most serious charge of insurrection. It's not insurrection per se, it's aiding or abetting, but how difficult is that to prove?
Well, I mean, thankfully, it hasn't been tested very often. So, I mean, part of how difficult it will be is that it's going to be, if it's used here, it'll be rolled out for the first time in a very long time. So you have to kind of combine all 4. You have to have this sort of Eastman theory, right? The fact that Donald Trump adhered to this concept that was so corrupt, the idea that he could put influence on Vice President Pence to change the outcome of the election, that was not just bad legal advice, but it was so bad that it constituted a crime. It was an obstruction, it was a fraud against the American people. Couple that with the words and the tweets of the day of January 6th, right? Lighting that match, kind of stoking the fire for weeks and weeks, and then leading up to that day, and you have an angry mob that then acts on the president's words and his encouragement. You have to kind of put them all together. And so again, it's in terms of a narrative, it works. The committee did a great job. Criminally, though, that'll be the uphill battle now, is kind of stringing that all together in a concept and a prosecution that actually works in court.
There are, I think, over 800 people who have been indicted and who will be charged for taking part in January 6th. Won't people in America wonder if the DOJ doesn't charge those who the committee deem are ultimately responsible?
No, I mean, that's a great point, Christian. And I think it was Representative Raskin who said that how can we let the sort of foot soldiers who got caught up on the January 6th riots go to jail when the ringleaders and those who kind of ran the show and gave them the idea walk off scot-free. So I definitely get the point that while there may be some fatigue in terms of going after Donald Trump, and some people may feel like the fact that he's not president, the fact that he's most likely never going to be president again is enough, I could definitely see the other argument that, you know what, there really has to be some process here, and we can't send 800 or 900 people to jail, rightfully so, without at least trying to prosecute those who kind of lit that match and sent them on their way.
And just quickly, I've only got a minute left, but do you see more criminal jeopardy for those who were around him, the likes of John Eastman, Rudy Giuliani, the legal advice he was getting?
I don't know about the congressmen that were referred to an ethics committee, but John Eastman, he definitely has some problems. Obviously, as a lawyer, the first thing I'm going to fall back is the sort of exception for getting legal advice, right? You can get bad legal advice. To get to a point where that legal advice turns to criminality, that's a high bar. And you know that if Donald Trump is facing charges, he's going to say, look, my lawyer told me this was okay. And then prosecutors will have to say, no, this was so grotesquely wrong, it constituted fraud and part of a conspiracy. That's going to be one of those difficult things to actually prove in court, though. And again, the committee had no one pushing back on these theories. So it's one thing to present them in a committee. It's another thing to actually prosecute them in a court of law.
OK, we're going to go to a quick break. We're going to come back and hear from a Democratic congressman about the decisions that have been taken today. We're also going to speak about Ukraine, important day in Ukraine with President Putin in Belarus talking to Alexander Lukashenko. We'll find out what that means. And of course, we'll talk plenty more about the committee and its findings. Do stay with us.